Gamers, welcome back to another Lost Ark guide video. Today we're going to be talking about the Abyss Dungeon Ivory Tower Gate 2. That was 4 fingers. Now, before we get started, I just want to preface this video by saying that this gate is way more complicated than the last one. So if this is your first time in here, it's going to seem a little overwhelming at first, but I promise you, with more experience, it'll be a lot easier and it'll start to make way more sense. Now, I tried my absolute best to try and keep this video as short as possible. There are some things that we go into extreme depth about, and then there are other things that I just kind of glance over quickly. Enjoy. All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about is the items that you are going to bring to this fight. Like usual, you're going to bring potions. The next item that you are going to take is destruction bombs. The destruction bombs will help with the destruction checks that you will see in this fight. It just makes them more consistent and more reliable to clear. For your next item slot, you have a few options. Your first option would be dark grenades. You can take these if you want to increase the damage that all of your party deals, get through a couple phases a little bit faster. Your next option would be time stop potions. You can take these if you just want to have a panic button that you can press that will save you from maybe potential death at certain points of the fight. Your next option would be marching flags. This is something that you can use during one of the transition phases during the fight that will put an aura around you that just increases everyone's movement speed. These are really nice to have in a group that is a little bit slower, maybe high specialization classes with low movement speed. And then your last option is atropines. For your first time in this fight, I wouldn't recommend taking these. The amount of damage that you'll take throughout this fight while still learning all the patterns is kind of insane, and atropines sacrifice your HP in order to deal more damage. I think dark grenades are a much safer bet if it's your first time in here. Okay, your fourth and final item slot is an item that is unique to this fight. You've never seen it before. What you're going to do before you start the fight is you're going to walk up to these walls at the side, and you're going to press G to interact. And then you can place them on your item bar so that you can use them in the fight. These items are called Guardian Restraining Orbs. They are the most important item that you are going to use in this fight. What these orbs do when thrown at the boss, they start a timer dial around the outside. When the dial runs out, they will attempt to attach themselves to the boss, trapping him from flying away and doing a bunch of other things. Okay, now for the fight itself. The first thing we're going to talk about is something that happens throughout the majority of the fight. Every few bars of HP that you take away from the boss, he's going to send out these 4 black orbs in the 4 corners around him. They slowly drift away from him and then slowly drift back, and they need to be gathered before they get back to him. Because the boss sends out 4 orbs and there's 4 players in the party, ideally everyone is responsible for 1 orb in each set. But if you notice that they're getting a little close to the boss, you can just pick them up yourself before your teammates do. When you come in contact with one of these orbs, you're going to get a buff. Now, this buff is pretty complicated. It's kind of a double-edged sword. It's got some pros and it's got some cons. First, we'll talk about the pros. What this buff gives you is faster attack speed, faster movement speed, and way shorter cooldowns. Okay, and now the con of this buff is that while you have it, if you get hit by an attack, your character is going to continuously bleed all the way down until they get to 10% HP. What this means is that no matter how much you want to heal yourself while you're still taking this bleed damage, you absolutely should not heal until you reach 10% HP and your character stops bleeding every single time. While your character is bleeding, they're going to spit out these little red orbs all over the place. If you walk into these red orbs, you actually gain the health back that you lost from the bleed. So the smart thing to do here is to wait until you bleed out all the way to 10% HP, and then you can run around and gather the orbs to heal yourself back up, or take a potion, or get healed by your support. Now, the little red health orbs that you spit out while you're bleeding, they don't last forever, so it is important that if you plan on using these to heal, that you use them rather quickly. Okay, lastly, if your party is doing enough damage, you should be able to have close to 100% uptime on this buff, at least during the normal part of this fight and when the boss isn't doing mechanics. Now, there's actually only 2 mechanics in this fight, and they're both pretty easy, so we'll talk about those later. The hard part of this fight is getting through the normal phases. So during the normal phases of this fight, the boss kind of has 3 different forms that he can potentially be in. The form that the boss is in is determined by the current number of orbs that you have attached to him. So the first form the boss can be in will be his default form. This is the form that he starts in when he has no orbs attached to him. This form is kind of chaotic. The boss has access to so many different attack patterns. I would recommend trying to spend as little time fighting the boss in this form as possible. Now, the second potential form that we can be fighting the boss in is when he has one orb attached to him. When he's in this form, he has access to fewer potential attack patterns, and most of them are right around him, so they are easier to predict. While he is in Form 2, he has a very specific set of patterns that he follows. Here's what happens. First, when you attach an orb, he's going to slam his feet, and there's going to be a star that you have to dodge on the ground. Then he's going to start with this rotation of there's a stagger check, then he does one attack, then he does a second attack, then he does a third attack. Then it goes back to another stagger, and this just rotates. Now, each stagger that you come across gets harder and harder, so you eventually will fail one. And once you fail a stagger, the boss is going to break out of his trap. The third and final form that the boss can be in is when he has two traps or orbs attached to him. The first thing that happens when you've attached two orbs to the boss is you will trigger a destruction check on the boss. Getting a successful destruction will remove a bunch of buffs from the boss, and this will stop some of his empowered attacks, but it will also give him a new buff, which makes him immune to becoming trapped for about 45 seconds, but you can see the timer on this one. Now, the best time to try to fight the boss in this form is right before a mechanic, because that means that the timer on the boss's immunity buff is going to decrease during the mechanic. So ideally, at the end of the mechanic, he doesn't have the immunity anymore, and you can get him trapped again. Okay, so now for the mechanics. The first one happens at 95 HP bars. What's going to happen for this mechanic is the boss is going to send out 3 clones of himself in a triangle around him. Between the boss and the 3 clones, that makes 4 positions. Each of the 4 players in the party should have a designated position that you and your party can plan before you start the pull. The support should be the person who takes the middle position, which is the position where the boss will be, where the 3 DPS spread out in a triangle around the outside of the boss, each standing at one of these blood clones of the dragon. When the mech starts, whoever is standing closest to the boss in the middle will get these red eyes above their head. Ideally, this goes on to the person who was supposed to be at the middle position when you decided with your teammates at the beginning, but whoever gets these red eyes needs to stay in the middle. The person in the middle has one job. It's just to spin in a circle and don't stand in the boss's frontal cone. If you do step foot in the frontal cone, the boss will just do a breath of fire in that direction. The players on the outside have one of 2 jobs. At each of these positions, these blood clone dragons will either need to be countered or need to be spun in a circle just like the boss in the middle. The most important thing when you go to your position on the outside is that you don't stand directly in front of these clones. 2 clones will need to be countered every single time, and 1 clone will need to be spun. If your clone is the one that needs to be spun, they'll get a red cone in front of them that you cannot touch. If you touch this red cone at all, your party will wipe. The safest thing to do when you get to your clone position is to stand just off to the side of the front of the clone. That way, when it starts to curl up right before it flashes blue for the counterattack, you can step in front and press your counter. But also that means that if you do get the one that's going to explode if you stand in front of it, you won't be in front of it, so you can just keep spinning and it'll keep trying to look at you and you just keep on spinning. After the 2 players responsible for the counters have countered their clones, you're going to run over to the third one and you're going to kill it. If you pick up the bloods on your way over, you also gain a big damage increase as well as the normal cooldown and attack speed increase that you would normally get from the bloods. The mech is over once all 3 clones have been dealt with. The second and final mechanic will happen around 30 bars. The boss's stagger bar will lock before he starts to phase. Once the boss starts phasing, you're going to make sure that you have all of the bloods collected, because if not, they will explode. Then you're going to go stand in the middle of the arena. The middle of the arena is going to be where the first safe spot is. Then once the boss lands at a side, you're going to run to the opposite side of the boss. It will always be either the top right or the bottom right of your screen. An important note here is that your camera angle is about to go kind of wonky, so the easiest thing to do is to click a safe spot once you can see it and just let your character auto path up there, because if you hold your movement skill or keep clicking during the camera transition, it can actually redirect your movement to a position that will not be safe from the explosion, which will result in you dying. Once you're on this side of the map and your camera changes, the boss is going to do a fire breath from either left to right or right to left. Just wait patiently for the fire to pass your party, and then start trying to run across the map. There will be a stagger check on the boss that you need to clear before he does a second fire breath that will kill your team. So take your time, make sure you dodge these orbs, and try to get across to the boss in order to stagger. The stagger check is pretty easy to clear. It really only takes 2 players, maybe 3, depending on how much stagger your party has. The most important thing here is that you don't come in contact with one of these orbs. Touching one of these orbs will stun you for a very long time and will most likely get you killed. Once you clear this stagger, run away from the boss back to the middle of the map. The boss does a big star explosion that hurts a lot and actually can kill you if you're a very squishy class. Once you get to the middle of the arena, you'll notice your items are still locked. You can't use them, but you're going to start spamming your restraining orb right in the middle of the arena here. The first thing the boss does when the camera goes back to normal, he jumps towards a player who's targeted with the eyeballs, so everyone should stay stacked in the middle on the orbs. Once the boss lands on the traps, hopefully you'll have 2 of them attach and you'll get the destruction check. Make sure you clear this destruction check. It is very important. After clearing the destruction, that's the end of the fight. All you have to do is live and finish off the boss. One thing to note about the rest of the fight from here on out is the longer the fight goes on, the boss gains this stacking buff. Every stack of this buff that the boss gets increases the damage that he deals, but also increases the damage that he takes. So as long as you just focus on living, your supports focus on keeping everyone alive, eventually you guys will do so much damage that it's insane. You'll burn through his entire HP bar in almost 1 burst window. And you can get some pretty insane damage if this fight lasts long enough. All right, guys, that is it. It's not really it, but that's it for now. For your first time going in, I know that's a ton of information. And again, I tried my best. I really tried my best to cut it down and make it as simple as possible. But there are some things that I just felt like extra information was a little necessary on certain parts. I really hope that you don't feel overwhelmed after watching all of that. And then lastly, there's actually more that you can know about this fight. Obviously, there's always more that you can learn about every single fight. I tried to just cover the parts that I thought were most important for a first timer going in. After watching this video, you absolutely have all of the information that you will need to go in and get it clear on your first time. However, there are certain strategies that a lot of groups will use, specifically regarding the special item that you get in this fight that you're going to throw at the dragon that allows you to control the pacing of the fight, I guess. So if you're interested, after you're done watching this video, I decided that I'm actually just going to make a different video. I'm just going to watch back a run that I do with one of my groups, and I'm just going to give you running commentary on when and why we're choosing to throw this specific item. If you follow one of these specific strategies, the fight gets way easier, but it's also a lot to keep track of for your first time. So if you're going in with a bunch of players that are first timers and you guys are progging together, I wouldn't worry too much about that part, which is why I didn't include it in this video. However, if you are going to join one of my learning parties, or if you're joining a group with at least one person who's maybe helping you through it, then knowing the strategy of the pattern, when to throw and when not to throw, could be helpful. So again, if you're interested in that, there will be a link to another video. Otherwise, I wish you the best of luck. I really hope this video helps. And as always, thanks for watching. Did you hear it? How do you do that every time? Come on.